It's mind-blowing how good mid-range phones have gotten in the past few years. The keyword that I want to focus on in this video is value. When you buy a phone, are you really getting your money's worth? A year ago, who would have thought that we'll be getting a 120 Hz high refresh rate AMOLED screen, a 108 megapixel camera, stereo speakers, and a large battery for a phone that costs 1,099 ringgit, which is about 265 USD. Yup, this is how much this phone costs, the Redmi Note 10 Pro. Actually, I wonder how much profit Xiaomi is making from one of these. Anyway, let's go through the specs. This phone runs on the Snapdragon 732G SoC, which is expected at this price range. And in Malaysia, this phone comes in two RAM configurations, which is 6GB or 8GB of LPDDR4X RAM. And both models have the same UFS 2.2 storage at 128GB. And it comes in three different colors, which is Gradient Bronze, Onyx Black, and Glacier Blue. I've already unboxed this phone in a previous video, so if you haven't seen it yet, I'll link it up here. Okay, what kind of build quality can you expect from a phone at this price range? Shockingly, quite a lot. For starters, the phone is 164mm tall and 76.5mm wide. It weighs 193 grams and the display measures 6.67 inches. The phone feels great to hold in one hand due to the fact that it has curved edges and in no way feels cheap, even though it has a glossy plastic frame. There's a single punch hole camera cutout right in the middle at the top. The 120 Hz AMOLED display is protected by Gorilla Glass 5, and it is a flat one. The bezels surrounding the screen are almost even except at the bottom, but you can hardly tell the difference. On the right hand side of the phone, we have the fingerprint scanner, aka the power button, and also the volume buttons. On the left hand side, there's the SIM slot. One thing worth mentioning is that the micro SD card slot is a dedicated slot, and it is not shared with the second SIM slot, unlike some other phones. At the top, we have a 3.5mm headphone jack. Yes, it has one of these as well, one of the stereo speaker grills, a microphone, and in typical Xiaomi fashion, an IR blaster. At the bottom, we have the second speaker grill, the USB Type-C port, and the other microphone. At the back, we can see the gradient bronze color for the unit that I bought, and the glass back is made from Gorilla Glass. I'm just not sure what kind. The texture is kind of matte, but not too glossy as in you cannot see your reflection when you look at it. It still attracts fingerprints though. The camera module has a unique staircase design, and I won't deny it, it looks kind of cool in my opinion. Some will hate it, some will love it. I'll talk more about the cameras later. This is one of the only phones in this price range that has an official IP rating. In the Redmi Note 10 Pro's case, it is IP53, which means it is resistant to dust and spraying water. By the way, if you like my videos, please do subscribe. It will help me to create better content for your viewing pleasure. Now let's talk about that 120 Hz AMOLED display. It has a Full HD Plus resolution and a 240 Hz touch sampling rate. A year ago, even the S20 and Note 20 series can only run 120 Hz at 1080p resolution. And to see that feature dripping down to mid-range phones is bonkers. I didn't have a high expectation at this price range, but Xiaomi continues to break down the barrier of what a mid-range smartphone should have. It's HDR10 certified and has a peak brightness of 1200 nits when viewing HDR content. According to GSM Arena, the Redmi Note 10 Pro's display is adaptive, but only switches between 60 Hz and 120 Hz, and I can confirm this. Its refresh rate doesn't go as low as the flagship displays, which means it would not be able to save as much battery. But since it is using a mid-range processor, this somehow counteracts that weakness due to the fact that mid-range processors does not consume a lot of power. Which leads me to my next point. During everyday usage, battery life has been exceptional. The highly efficient Snapdragon 732G in combination with the large 5020 mAh battery results in a worry-free everyday usage. My normal routine when I go out typically involves using Waze for navigation, watching some Netflix while waiting in line, and taking the occasional photos. And when you need to charge it, it takes about an hour and 20 minutes to charge it to full using the supplied 33-watt charger in the box. It has about the same battery capacity as the Mi 10T Pro, but it takes 20 minutes slower to charge it to full. So I'm assuming the battery tech is different compared to the Mi 10T Pros. But to be fair, that phone costs 900 ringgit more. So what can you expect from the Snapdragon 732G? How does it compare to the flagship SoCs out there? So let me put this the simplest way possible. When using the phone for things other than gaming, for example, opening and closing apps, multitasking, web browsing, watching streaming services, you won't notice that you're using a mid-range phone, which is mainly contributed to that 120 Hz AMOLED screen. It is only in graphically intensive games that the Adreno 618 GPU in the Snapdragon 732G shows its limit. Playing Genshin Impact on the highest settings is not an enjoyable experience. You will start to notice dropped frames and it takes slightly longer to load. But if you're willing to lower the settings, it's definitely playable. PUBG, on the other hand, is definitely a better experience, even on high settings, and the Snapdragon 732G held up quite well. Now, Xiaomi proudly states that the Redmi Note 10 Pro has a 108 megapixel camera. But how does it actually perform? Let's take a look at a few sample photos. Images taken with the Redmi Note 10 Pro's 108 megapixel sensor tends to be a bit soft in some pictures when compared to higher-end flagships. But in its defense, it's not meant to compete with those phones. I also noticed that the images churned out by the Note 10 Pro has a warmer tone when compared to the actual colors in real life. In some photos, it is able to stand toe-to-toe with my iPhone 12 Pro Max, just with warmer colors. But in some scenes, the warmer colors does play to its advantage. Like in this one, the blue tint in the iPhone's image makes the wooden house looks weird, and I would prefer the image taken by the Redmi. But in this one, the bamboo leaves in the middle of this image lacks detail and looks blurry. When you consider the fact that this is a 1,099 ringgit phone, you get way more than what you pay for. Ultra-wide images taken from the 8 megapixel sensor is above average with great dynamic range and consistent colors with the main wide lens. Contrast is well balanced and does not look over the top. The tele macro lens is nothing short of amazing at this price range. It does require that you have adequate light though. So to counteract this, just turn on the flash and you can get photos such as this in dark environments. Also, the subject needs to stay almost still to get acceptable results. Colors taken from this lens are close to real life, but you need a few attempts to get sharp photos. Portraits are great as well. Subject separation for human subjects are good for non-human subjects. It works better than I expected, but it depends on the shape of your subject. There are artifacts here and there if you're trying to take a picture of a complex subject. Night mode only works on the main lens. Night mode can also salvage images in those dimly lit environments where there are light sources that you want better exposed, like in this example. If you don't use night mode, you won't be able to see the outline of the light bulb. In terms of video, the Redmi Note 10 Pro can only record stabilized video at 1080p. I would highly advise against using 4K. It's a shaky mess and I believe the feature is just there so that Xiaomi can put it in its spec sheet. But one thing which is not a gimmick though are macro videos. With the right amount of creativity, you can get pretty amazing results. This is the audio and video quality that you can expect. The maximum resolution and frame rate supported by the front camera is 1080p 30 frames per second, and this is what you can expect. So what do I think about the Redmi Note 10 Pro? To be honest, at this price range, it's hard to beat. Actually, its closest competitor is from Xiaomi's own Poco lineup, the Poco X3 Pro. The Poco X3 Pro starting price is exactly the same as the Redmi Note 10 Pro's base model, which is 999 ringgit. It has a much better Snapdragon 860 SoC, a faster storage, but it is using an IPS LCD display. You should only buy the Redmi Note 10 Pro if you value that 120Hz AMOLED screen, great cameras for a mid-range phone, stereo speakers, and a large battery. Also, you should not buy the Redmi Note 10 Pro if you value performance and you're not taking a lot of nighttime photos. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so that you'll get notified each time I upload astounding new content. This is Adi, signing out.